Okay, we'd like to go ahead and begin our North Ogden City Planning Commission meeting on June 4th, 2025 at 6 p.m. I am Vice Chair Green. I'll be conducting this meeting. We will have an invocation or thought by Commissioner Gardner and then Pledge of Allegiance by, do you want to lead that one, Webb?
Happy
Is that
to.
okay? Commissioner Webb.
Yep.
We'll go to that point.
I'll just give an invocation. Okay. Our dear Father in heaven, we bow before thee this evening and thank thee for this beautiful day and being able to meet together as a planning commission. Bless us with thy inspiration and thy spirit this night and help us to always think of the community and our neighbors as we deal with issues here in the planning commission. We say these things humbly in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Repeat after me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you both. Okay, so tonight, I'm in attendance, Commissioner Green, we've got Commissioner Webb, Commissioner Gardner, and the rest of the commissioners will be excusing for this evening. We move on to consent agenda item number 2, which is action and consideration to approve the May 7th, 2025 Planning Commission meeting minutes. I did review those pretty thoroughly, so I would be comfortable making a motion to approve those meeting minutes.
I read through them and I'll second that.
Okay, perfect. We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, perfect. That is approved. We'll move on to number 3. Do we still do that if we're just doing training? We don't have an action item. Okay, we'll skip the conflicts of interest where we don't have a specific item that would relate to. And we will move on to number 4, public comments for items not on the agenda. I don't think, do we have anyone online potentially?
Nope.
Okay, we will move past that and also welcome Commissioner, oh my goodness, Bailey. Thank you. I was like, Commissioner Chad. No, that's not right. Okay, so we will move on to number 5 then, which is our planning commissioner a member quarterly training, the water use element of the general plan, state required adoption by December 2025. And we've got Scott Hess and Ryan Nunn as presenters on this item.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Chair. I appreciate the time and appreciate you all coming to a training and having just that on the agenda. We have several things coming up on the 18th. I do want to say right now while I'm thinking about it that it's likely we will cancel the July 2nd Planning Commission meeting. That's just during Cherry Days. There are several events happening each day that week, and I think that would be prudent to do. So there are several items on the 18th. So I plan on that for sure for a meeting. It's going to be a longer one with administrative items. So today we'll do our second quarterly training. We've promised to do these on a more regular basis than we have in the past years and bring those forward. And we have by state code actually adopted in 2022 that went in effect during the 22 session, a requirement for cities over 10,000 population to have a water element of their general plan. And we have not done that water use element of the general plan. I thought it'd be a good idea to bring to the Planning Commission a few resources before we consider that, talk a little bit about what the state's requirements are for that water use element, and then review the draft that we've written. It's really just a shell of that section that's a few pages long, and get the Planning Commission's initial feedback and any questions that you have as we go into the meetings we will do with Division of Natural Resources, Division of Water Quality, and our secondary water providers, as well as our culinary water. So to begin with, I'm going to show you about 12 minutes of an hour-and-a-half long video that Utah League of Cities and Towns had several presenters come in and do what water conservation in our communities looks like. And this was the Utah League of Cities and Towns 2022 spring training. So this is a recorded training. We'll just watch 10 or 12 minutes of it or so, And then we'll pull up some of these other resources, go through, and feel free to ask questions. I don't think Ryan and I don't have a full hour of talking, to the Planning Commission. So we'd love for you to engage. And once we get past about 30-35 minutes, I think they'll pretty well constitute the hour of training by the time you've come and attended the meeting and we get through everything. So with that, John, if you don't mind turning it over so I can. And we should all be able to hear, but I've got to put the mic down to my computer.
Scott, will we have a public hearing?
We will when we bring you the actual general plan section.
Okay,
So for right now, this is it's a training and
right.
an item just to
So
collect
When it
information.
comes time to adopt
It
it.
will. Yep, we will. Thank you. Okay, well, we'll watch this for just a little over 10 minutes. And if you have any questions or you want me to stop, just raise your hand or flag me down. Thanks.
And then, of course, Joel didn't really talk about the Great Salt Lake a whole bunch, although his graph was really awesome as far as showing inflows to the Great Salt Lake. And I'm not really going to talk about the Great Salt Lake either, except that it is an overriding interest that also drove legislation this year. And so I just pulled up two pictures. The one on the left is what the Great Salt Lake looked like in the year 2000. And now in 2020, you can see that it's struggling, and the lake is not something we really factored in the past in trying to figure out available water supplies and what we could do with the water that was there. Clearly, the lake is going to be an issue for those of us in northern Utah who are dealing with water. But regardless of whether you're in northern Utah or other areas that are not associated with the Great Salt Lake watershed, water conservation is not going to be going away. And so getting into actually how do we deal with water use planning and land use planning. This has been ongoing for a few years, the idea that this needs to be addressed. And you'll notice I'm also referring to the same website that Joel did. And the Division of Water Resources did not pay me to include a bunch of stuff from their website on here, but you're going to see I used a lot of stuff from their webpage because they have been working on this for a couple of years. And you can see it's that same website, water.utah.gov. If you go to that website, there's a drop-down link called projects, and then underneath projects, it says integrated water and land planning, or the link on here shows what that is as well. And this was something that was completed, the phase one was completed last year, where Division of Water Resources had some money. They were able to go out and hire a consultant to start talking about what can a community do to address in their general plan how to be more efficient with water use. And this was just a quote that was included in that report. And the phase two of this, which is really exciting, will be where some cities, and if you're interested in participating, there'll be an email link later on, you'll see. But if you're interested in participating in some workshops, there's an opportunity to email and one so that you can get involved in workshops on integrating land use and water use in your general plan. So we're really good at planning as cities. We plan really well for land use, and water providers, whether it's done by a city or by a separate entity, are really good at water planning. We're just not always good at merging those two things together. And so this is where I wanted to talk about the question on Senate Bill 89 and a water conservation plan. You can see on the right-hand side, one of the very first thing I mentioned that water providers are supposed to do is prepare a water conservation plan. Senate Bill 89 does not apply to every city. It only applies to cities who are required to do a water conservation plan as part of their operation of their water utility. But if you're a city that does not do your own water, don't have a water enterprise fund or something in your city, Senate Bill 89 does not require you to do something. But what I'm going to talk about today, which is Senate Bill 110, does require us, everybody, cities and counties, to address water use in their general plan. So anyway, I'm not going to go through and talk about all of these. All I can say is that we're really good at plans. We need to be better at coordinating those plans together. And we're going to talk a little bit about how how the direction that Senate Bill 110 gave us is to do that. And so let's talk exactly about what the bill says. First of all, it requires any city that's a first through fourth class city. That means your 10,000 population or above. And it also requires all counties to include a new element in their general plan. And this is called the water use and preservation element. And the bill says that you need to do this by the end of 2025. Hopefully, you're not going to wait that long to get into this. And I do want to mention one thing. I know that the legislature has asked cities to do a lot, and your planners are probably going crazy. We've got moderate and low income housing plans, and those were changed. And I think there's an upcoming seminar on that. You have stationary plans, which also has an upcoming webinar, and retail incentives, all of which require planners to do a lot of work. And so it's not all that welcome probably that I'm showing up and saying, hey, you need to make water use a really important part of what your planners are doing as well. And so trying to figure out how to juggle that is going to be difficult, but waiting is not a good idea on this water use element. And I'll talk a little bit hopefully about how that can work going forward. So what you're supposed to have in this new element is an analysis of the effect of permitted development or patterns of development on water demand and water infrastructure. So really all this is saying is, look at what you're telling people to do in your community today. Think about if we build our community according to what our ordinances say now, what will that look like in terms of water use? And is that what we really want? It might have been what we wanted in 20 years ago or 25 years ago, but in the circumstances we're in today, with the knowledge that we're going to be doubling population and that water supplies are limited and that we're going to have these challenges, is that what we want our community to look like? The next thing is, how can we reduce water demand and per capita consumption for future development? Because obviously people are coming in and developing, putting in new homes, new manufacturing facilities. What can we do so that the new people coming in don't, I was going to say make the same mistakes. That would suggest that we screwed up in the past, but that they don't have undue water demand going forward. And then thirdly, how can we reduce water demand and per capita consumption for existing development? So it's a different strategy about how you go back and address kind of the built environment. And then finally, what opportunities does the municipality, or if you're a county, does the county have to eliminate practices or conditions that waste water? This final element is a little bit different. The first three are all about your land use and your zoning code and maybe your subdivision code. And maybe even economic incentives. Who are you incentivizing to come and develop in your community? But the last point is really about how do you operate as an organization? Are you being as efficient as you can be or should be? And how can you be a better example? Which kind of goes back, the bill doesn't say anything, by the way, about that you're supposed to have a specific outcome. That was really important in the drafting of this, was even though it's a requirement to update your general plan, that you had the flexibility as an individual city or a county to figure out how you wanted to achieve these goals. But the state bill, Spendlove's bill that talked about state facilities and new facilities and how they would use grass, is a good example of something you could look at in saying, what can we do as a municipality or a county to change how we're operating? I'd also say, even though only first through fourth class cities are required by the bill to update their general plan, it would really be a great idea, even if you're a fifth class city or a town, to go through this same exercise. Some legislators were afraid that this was an undue burden on smaller communities. I think this is scalable. A small community doesn't have to go through the same level of intensity when it comes to doing this review as a really big city. And so I think it's easily within the reach of smaller communities to go through and update their general plans as well. They're just not required to by the statute. Okay, so what does the Planning Commission look at when they're preparing this new general plan element? And so they are supposed to consider, review, or consult with, first of all, they should consider the regional water conservation goals, which Joel's already referred to. And I'll take just a second in a minute to address a little bit more about that from the perspective of this bill. You should also be looking at a water conservation plan if you are a city that has a water conservation plan. If you don't have a water conservation plan, well, I'll get to that in just a minute. So also consider principles of sustainable landscaping, which we'll get to in a minute. And so this is what I was going to say. If you don't have a water conservation plan because you don't operate a public water utility, well, guess what? You have a public water system who provides you with water, your citizens. And so you are required to go talk to that public water system and have dialogue with them. They would love to talk to you about their system and what their system is designed for and how much water, you need to be providing them or how much they need to be providing you. And they will have a water conservation plan. But the problem for a water provider, they don't have land use authority. And so they frequently aren't in a position to do anything to make sure that that water conservation plan is implemented. They need your help. And so if you're communicating with them, then that will make a big difference in making sure that the land use side and the water use side are in sync when it comes to water projects. Counties are not required to consult with the public water system, mostly because generally there's lots and lots of public water systems within a county. And so it'd be difficult to say to the county, you have to talk to every single public water supplier in your entire county. I would still say, though, counties would be encouraged to at least reach out and talk to some of them or figure out who it makes sense to consult with as they are working on their general plan. And then finally, you should consider water demand reduction strategies, which are also described in the bill. So just a real brief additional statement about the regional water goals.
So I'll pause it there, and that's a brief overview as well as some of the intention behind the bill. So Great Salt Lake is receding. We want to make sure that we're cognizant about the water that we have. We have major growth coming in Utah, and you have culinary resources as well as secondary water resources that we'll watch continue to be taxed as we move forward. I'll just point out that Weber River, the 2015 use was 250 gallons per customer per day. The 2030 goal is 200 gallons per customer per day, so it's a 20% reduction. And John, I'm going to have you help me really quick with the number. What's our current average water use per equivalent residential unit as of today?
On the study, I think it says 227, but
So
that's an average. Yeah.
we're close. And the estimate for use, or the estimate that we have from the state for use, is almost 300 gallons per day, per user per day. So we are already under that by 80, well, not quite 70 something gallons per user per day or per home per day. And we need to get a little bit better than that as of right now. And there's two types of water users. There's your single family home, multifamily home, townhome, apartment, whatever it is. So that's like the general water connection. And then there's something called an equivalent residential user, an ERU, and that is businesses and the amount of water they use, and they calculate it out as if, how many single family homes would this particular business use? And we don't have any major water resource users in North Ogden. Regionally, there's some. So Kimberly-Clark doing paper products is a huge one. The Procter & Gamble plant that's up in Box Elder is a huge water user. Down in southern Salt Lake County, they have is it Facebook, I think, but they've got a great big server farm out there that uses water as cooling. And that's like a one-time water infusion for the most part. And then that water cooling gets to run through several times. We do have some car washes. Car washes are generally required now to reuse and recycle that water, but that's not 100% reuse and recycle. But it is something for us to think about in economic development as we move forward. Yeah, go ahead.
Question. How accurate are your use compared with the business that they have? I mean, can that be refined to, I guess, get a little more accuracy, or are we just taking what the state's saying? Or
We typically take what the study kind of projects out based on meter size. It's typically off. Usually the reality is that the older homes are probably, or the older businesses are probably low and the newer ones are probably high. So that's just kind of the way that, because we didn't used to calculate it as closely as we do now.
Right.
But I was just wondering if there's some tweaking we can do there to help improve.
Probably. We have CRS engineers that have provided a water impact fee study for us, and we'll go through this a little bit. Culinary water impact fee facilities plan. And this is a really great, and it's a brief document. It's 30 pages long with some appendices. But it goes through a number of things: level of service growth projections, proposed level of service. And this does have some estimate of the ERUs that we currently have in North Ogden. Interestingly, 2022, the land use plan for this doesn't show as much multifamily as we currently have. So it's still showing the southwest area of the city as low density residential. But I've had conversations with CRS between 2022 and now that I believe they've updated that. I just don't know that the map has been updated. And John, is this impact fee study has not been adopted yet?
Correct. We are waiting for the analysis to be completed by Zions Bank.
Okay, so it's close to being adopted. And we'll talk about this here in just a minute. I wanted to talk a little bit about the storage that we have, but just a question for the Planning Commission. Who are our water providers for culinary and secondary water? Do you know who they are?
I have a guess, but I don't know that I'm right.
Yeah, go for
And
it.
this was my burning question, like, what are they? So we have, for secondary water, we're part of Pineview Water System.
Mhm.
And I think we have some pretty old water rights with that. If I remember correctly, when I was a kid, like in the 70s, each house actually owned a share of Pineview. And I'd be really curious to know how that changed over time.
Yeah, that's
There was like
interesting.
half a water share or something like that.
When I talked with Ben Quick, who was the former manager, his assessment was that for every acre of ground that had been given or that had been developed, there was 2 acre-feet of water,
Okay.
maybe 4, but I think it was 2. And his interpretation of that was because it was tied to a house that technically those houses still each owned
Oh, wow.
2 acre-feet. However, it's not like you can go and sell it. And
Yeah.
he was talking about if the overall system need was moved to 1 acre-foot, then how do you compensate those homeowners who have 2 acre-feet of value if you're gonna
Yeah.
peddle that off to
It's a
others?
it's a very interesting legal question, and I think a pretty important water legal question for the city. When it comes to culinary water, I believe that there are 9 wells throughout North Ogden. I could be wrong on that number, but basically we have pipes that are stuck in the ground, and the big sponge that is this mountain, right, is where our water is sitting. And I would be fascinated to see if we could ever figure out a financial way to study that and what water use law is, because I think we don't have roads and we don't have that traffic. A very valuable commodity for the city. If that's, I don't know.
It's
It's
you're
a
right.
Tricky argument.
If it was on the open market, but there are some state rules that don't allow the cities to profit off the sale of water.
Really?
And so if we were to release our water shares back into the open market, we can't make money. And we actually, I think, legally are obligated to offer them back to the person we bought them from at the price we paid. But I think there'll be some changes with that where we would also probably in some point in the future have the option of giving them to the state.
Yeah, I don't know that we want to give them to the state unless we had to.
Hmm.
Like it'd be really interesting to try to get ahead of that legally.
Yeah.
Honestly.
It's really interesting. And Lauren actually represents the city on one of the boards. Which one is it?
Coldwater number
Cold
2.
water, number
Oh,
2.
cool.
So he knows a lot about secondary
Well, I shouldn't have been the one.
areas and everything.
No,
We also, besides wells, we have a series of springs
Oh, cool.
that we tap into and use for.
And they're everywhere.
our water system.
So without asking Lauren, because he knows this question, you hit two of the major providers. Do you know who our third, and it's an irrigation secondary water company provider is?
Don't.
Nisa, Chad?
Bona Vista?
No. It's Mountain View Irrigation. So it's Marriott Land Company and Mountain View Irrigation, and they service the north portion of the city down to, and I'm not totally sure the line, 3550 or 3900, like,
It's
That's
about
a good approx.
39, yeah.
yeah, it sort of depends, but
Serve the upper elevations in the
Right.
city. Mountain View does.
so we
That
have,
water come from? That
Springs off Ben Lomond.
just, oh, that's all spring water.
and they've got several water reservoirs.
No, that's
No,
secondary.
it's secondary.
Secondary, but they're using it as spring water.
They're using it for
Spring water
secondary,
for your,
secondary water.
okay, so it doesn't need to be tested and
No.
potable.
No. Yeah, so they have a water reservoir on the far north side of our city that you can see by Google Maps, or if you take the Bonneville Shoreline Trail, you'll pass that water reservoir as you kind of come around the 45 degree of the mountain. And they are who those northern residents, so that would be the Cove, everything north of Mountain Road, the Jordan Park subdivision, the Northview Hills subdivisions and phases, all receive their will serve letter for secondary water from Mountain View Irrigation, and then everybody else receives their will serve from Pine View Irrigation. And in watching over the last 4 years what has happened, Pine View is pretty quick to give a will serve to a single family residential home, probably because we turned over water rights from the city that we had, or those equivalent water rights. And Pine View seems to have the secondary water enough to serve the lower portions, like the lower 3/4 of our city. The northern quarter of our city with Mountain View Irrigation, they have provided some will serve letters, but have recently started asking the homeowners or home builders in that area to actually bring a water share with them, not just pay them for a portion of a water share that they have.
Huh.
And I mean, you don't expect, I don't personally, I guess this is a Scott Hess thing and not as the planner of the city, but I don't expect a whole lot of moderate income housing to happen from like 3900 north up to the fire break line of the city and the mountain, but it's a significant cost. I mean, one water share for a single family home right now can be between $15,000 and $20,000 on the open
That's what
market
it was.
to go purchase it. So if you're a subdivider building all the spec homes and selling them, and you've got 30 plus lots, and it's a significant cost that you have to bear in order to satisfy that we will serve you letter from Mountain View Irrigation. So that's kind of a primer. I think that our city's website in the public works departments, if you go from the home to departments to utilities and public works, and then you come down to water, we have some really intriguing and interesting resources on our water page that we have right now. And they've already talked a lot in this section of our website alone about the conservation efforts that they have. But I do want to show this this is 2 minutes of our culinary water system and what we've done as the city.
Northern Utah, where one city is investing more than $1 million to update its water meter technology. ABC4's Northern Utah correspondent Kate Gardner met with North Ogden water operators who explain how the investment is paying off during the drought.
In North Ogden, every time someone turns on the shower or faucet, the city is able to track it down to 1/10 of a gallon per minute, thanks to these water meters that use cell technology.
So it's basically the same way your cell phone reads. It just transmits. We have a base station set up by North Ogden Divide, and this transmits your data out, and then it sends it back to us on the computers.
Along with the base station, the data is also sent from a handful of repeaters, which sit on light poles. In the past, water operators would drive down the street once a month collecting the information. Now, it's done daily, and for a good reason.
If water runs through this continuously for 12 hours straight, it sends us a leak alarm.
When that happens, the city can look at a particular home's hourly water use. If there is a leak,
We'll go there and help them identify it so they don't have to call a plumber.
often a leak is small.
We find a lot of toilets, like you said, the flappers aren't sealing shut against the tank.
Hill says a faulty toilet could lead to more than 140 gallons wasted daily, and the idea is to catch it within a few days.
Instead of using water that whole month and getting charged
an extra 15,000 gallons of water will be there, and it's only hundreds of gallons of water, so they don't see a real impact on their bill and they can get it fixed.
City officials say this not only helps keep bills down, but helps save water during the drought.
Water's a precious resource, and I think that we'll make a conservation effort, especially now.
In North Ogden, Kate Garner, ABC4 News.
So I think from a culinary standpoint, the city's really doing a lot of this is doing really good work. So Johnson, you had said we've got the springs, the wells. North Ogden is unique to me, and I come from Davis County where almost everybody purchases Weber Basin water, which is a portion or a part of the Pine View system as well. All of those cities out there rely for both culinary and secondary water in large part on these agreements and purchasing water that's then a pass-through cost to the cities. And North Ogden, we have 100% of our own culinary water resources planned for, prepared, and we move around the city entirely free from anybody else's control. And that, I don't know how many cities are that way, but it's fairly unique for us to be able to do that. And one thing I'll say, since this is recorded and I screwed this up once, is that the stump water is natural spring water that is tested rigorously. But I originally had thought that it's actually just culinary water. And I ruined a bunch of people's days on a Wasatch Front Regional Council meeting by saying that. And now I need to correct myself. And the next time I'm in that meeting with like 100 people who I dashed their dreams. So the stump water is just natural water that comes out of the ground. It is tested, very, very regularly and rigorously, and we can turn it off. So we do turn it off at times. But go get that water. And otherwise, we don't have any secondary water. So between Pine View and Mountain View Irrigation, we will coordinate with them on the plan. But two things is the city so far has been hesitant to pass some of the ordinances that allow for us to participate in Pine View Water Systems Rip Your Strip program, because the obligation then turns over to the city to be what I'd call the water police, to make sure that people aren't overwatering their lawns with secondary water. And we don't have, we have staff to take care of our culinary water resources, but we don't have the staffing to drive around and watch for people watering in the middle of the day or overwatering, or the amount that they're watering or days that they water. We literally don't have that staff. So Lauren?
I know there's a few of our residents or businesses that they use culinary water for their outdoor watering.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What are we doing to improve that situation or change them over?
So nothing right now. And where you're talking about is approximately 2100 north to about 2400 north on the west side of Washington Boulevard. And the reason that they don't have secondary water is they're sort of an isolated little location of the city. So there's a few old single family residential homes. Think like box storage, the area just sort of immediately surrounding and around box storage and going south has no secondary water resources right now. And the cost to get it under Washington Boulevard and to pop up over on the west side of the city or west side of Washington Boulevard is significant, and a cost that we haven't made a developer bear at this point. So all the new development that has been approved there has been done with xeriscaping and like limited no green space essentially, and very limited culinary water use. But I don't know that we're actively trying to get them off of our system.
Would it help for us to work with Pine View to maybe encourage them?
Yep.
Put it on their plans to make that happen someday?
Yeah, absolutely. And they're aware of it. So in all of the technical review committee meetings that we have that's all of engineering, planning, public works folks, and we have representatives from Pine View or Mountain View Irrigation, depending where the project is. They come and they're aware of that issue, but again, it's such a limited number of users that I don't think it's on their capital facilities plan generally. But that's something that we can add that's a note I'll make when we look through things we should talk to them about. Going back quickly just to the waters, we have a water quality report that is really good. Everybody should read it and understand what the water quality situation is in North Ogden. We are meeting all of the water quality standards, and there are items about this water use element of the general plan that I feel like are a little bit duplicative. So our Public Works Department is already considering and looking at secondary water conservation, the standards that are being asked for by Division of Water Quality, and others that we've written in, but we haven't necessarily codified. And I don't know that we will codify them. I mean, even through the general plan, general plans are not an obligation to be followed. They're recommendation documents that allow us then to go out and create ordinances around them. But it's not our intent, as far as I know, and I'm just the city planner, but it's not our intent to go out and take over Pine View's water systems and Mountain View irrigation. I mean, that would represent a huge liability on the city, and we're really not interested in doing that. We'd have to staff up in a major way, and there'd have to be like a catastrophe of one of those two organizations for us to take it over and operate that. But we already have been thinking about some of the water conservation elements. And then there's an entire section on the city's website about secondary water. But again, it's pretty brief, just talking about when we water, that secondary water is available to all North Ogden residents and is an untreated water supply, and contact Pine View and Mountain View irrigation systems for more information. And that's it. We kind of just, I don't want to say we ignore it, but we don't deal with it, and we don't want to. And our water use conservation portion of the general plan will agree with that and be pretty short. So I'm going to jump over the actual state code section is 109A402. And this is everything we have to do for our general plans as municipalities. And they added to this the water element, water preservation element. And these are the things that you all shall consider. And I've put that on a document here that we could go through, but I think the better thing to go through will just be the water use and preservation element as we've drafted it. So this is 5 pages long. It's really short. We've written in some purpose and vision. So water is a critical resource for the health, economy, and sustainability of North Ogden. As a growing community in a semi-arid climate, North Ogden recognizes its responsibility to steward water resources wisely for current and future generations. This water use and preservation element outlines strategies to conserve water, improve efficiency, and align land use practices with state and regional goals, including protection of the Great Salt Lake watershed. And we do our water, our black water and our gray water, so that's showering, dishwasher, toilet flushes, does ultimately end up in the Great Salt Lake. It runs down through the system, and our stormwater, I think, ultimately ends up in the Great Salt Lake. So it does, and we affect that, but we're like the point source of a lot of this water. We're not the end user or getting it out there. But I think that it is helpful for us to think about every time you run something down the drain, where does that water ultimately end up? So the legislative requirements, the plan needs to address the following: the effect of permitted development on water demand and infrastructure, methods for reducing water demand and per capita consumption for future development, methods for reducing water demand per capita consumption for existing development, and then opportunities to modify operations to eliminate or reduce conditions that waste water. And I love the meter upgrades the city has made, that we've invested in that meter upgrade, because those pop up when we had the drought. People who were using culinary water to preserve their exterior landscaping, it showed up in their water meter, and we knew who it was, and we could track that water use and charge them the fees that we associated with during the drought. And it's good, bad, and different, but there are people up there with 6 figures worth of landscaping that they've put in that's several years old, and they're not willing to lose mature trees and mature landscaping, and we're willing to pay the fees with culinary water. And that is something that we all should think about as an affluent community, is that as we march further up the hill, and if we were to run out of water shares for secondary water and demanded really extreme measures of exterior outdoor water watering for secondary water, I think there would be people who would be willing to use culinary and willing to pay for the potentially exorbitant prices of culinary water in order to maintain their landscaping. I think the question would be, do we as a city, from a policy standpoint, want that to be permitted? And right now the answer is no, because we've planned for water resources of existing interior water use for the 40,000 people, the population that we expect to have, but not for those folks to also use their water on outdoor watering. So the regional goals from the Division of Water Resources include the municipal per capita water use, promote sustainable landscaping, support water smart development patterns. I've put in some local conservation plan elements out of the state code. Anything in red are pieces that I wanted to either talk about or that we're still highlighting. So we recommend the adoption of the following water conservation policies. And these are all, so these ones I've written this bracket, these are all to be encouraged and enforced by our secondary water system providers. So we really don't have an effect on this other than we can ask Mountain View Irrigation or Pine View to do these things. Requiring low water use landscape designs and new developments. We can do that, but again, we're not the landscaping police. And Ryan and I, in review of building permits, and you have a home that's $2 million and you're asking them to cut 50% of their grass out, they kind of laugh at you a little bit, and they don't see it as water preservation. They see it as like an infringement on their ability to do what they want with their large piece of land and their really nice house. So there's been some, I think, a little bit of pushback on that we're still dealing with. And we need to decide as a city from a policy standpoint how far we want to go in requiring low water use landscaping. Implementing water budgets or allotments for municipal and public spaces. We could talk to Pine View about that, about what we're allocated for ourselves. For our own parks, we've talked internally about eliminating turf grass that isn't like programmable, playable park space, just so we have less to maintain. But what you put down there, sometimes the xeriscaping, the rocks can be more difficult to maintain to keep the weeds out than just watering and then you mow it, mow it once a week. Promote public education campaigns on conservation practices. I would love to write a newsletter article that highlights our city's website about the water. I'd imagine there aren't very many residents who have looked at that, but I think that's really interesting information. Enforce metering and monitoring standards for all new connections. So all new culinary water uses are metered, and we have the electronic meters as we just showed you. And by state code, all new secondary homes, all new secondary connections are metered, and they have until I think 2028 to meter 100% of the connections everywhere. And there have been state grants for that, and they're out there working on it.
2028.
I think it's 2028, isn't it? I'm not gonna.
I mean, it's 2028, but Pleasant View's all under, they're all doing it.
Yeah, everyone's doing it. Then they're required to do it. And there was state funding that was available for water service providers to jump on, and grants. But that's one of those reasons that it represents a huge liability for us as a city. If we were to take over the secondary water, is now all of a sudden we have 6,000 water meters, additional water meters that we have to think about and factor in and do something with. And I put in this bullet to discourage the use of municipal culinary water to water exterior landscaping and increase water rates and penalties for high water users. So I think that's something we should be thinking about. And we'll talk to Mountain View Irrigation about what their long-term water plans are, but I could see the potential for running out of secondary water before we run out of culinary water resources in the city. We've got some recommendations about park strip landscaping. We could recommend reducing or eliminating lawn or turf and park strips. The current state code says that we cannot require turf grass in areas that are less than 8 feet wide, which we don't have anything that requires that. But there were some cities that had hardline requirements of your park strip shall be turf grass. And they eliminated that requirement even for homeowners associations. So there were HOAs that required it, and now you can get around that through state code.
Hey, Scott,
Yeah.
would the previous section with like the goals or policies, would that be, because I know we mentioned about in an emergency, maybe losing some of our wells or something, right? Maybe that could be another policy of finding that, additional
Yep.
resources or.
And I have that a little bit lower because the way the plan for the municipal policies, there's kind of like the secondary water system stuff, and then it gets to culinary, but I really like that idea of establishing the redundancy of culinary water resources, which right now, if we were to have something that was brought up in an emergency operations center meeting that we had, where we plan for and think about and play around with what would happen during an earthquake event if that were to happen in North Ogden, and who's the first responders and what do we do, and we practice these things so that we're ready as a city for it to happen. But our city engineer and Dave Espinoza has said this now, and our building official said, it's very possible that under an earthquake scenario, that some of these water resources that right now are just coming out of Ben Lomond shift, move, turn off. The geology of it isn't fully understood. So I didn't really think about the fact that one of our largest, water resources, which is Rice Creek, could change under a fault slip entirely.
There's a grant out there to get some study money for things like that, which I imagine even at a federal level there could be.
Yeah.
Like that'd be an amazing thing to get is how to study and understand the resources that we have.
Right.
And if some of that could be, used in understanding water law and what our rights are, I think that could be incredibly valuable for us down the road.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Very interesting. So so our land use ordinance review, we can amend landscaping requirements. Title 11 controls, now I'm thinking state code Title 10, but our land use code does control a number of things related to residential homes. So we could eliminate mandatory turf areas in front yards or common areas, or you can only have 50% of your front yard in turf grass or other programmable areas. Updating subdivision design standards to limit turf and promote xeriscaping, review open space requirements to prioritize native vegetation and low water use alternatives. And this is a lot easier in areas where the native vegetation is something you want to save, say north of the Cove, and it's all the scrub oak, right? Like we would love to save that to a huge degree and not have a bunch of turf grass lawns up there. But how interested are we in preserving the hillside Dyer's Wood and just natural yellow grasses that grow? And some communities, like there's some residential areas of Park City, for instance, that are just simple roads cut up the hill with simple stormwater conveyance systems, and they're essentially all natural, other than when you get right around the home. So it's something we could look at, but we haven't done right now.
Could be very cool, actually.
Yeah. This was some sustainable landscaping principles. The city will supports and will integrate the following things: minimize or eliminate lawns and turf, encourage site-specific landscaping, promoting the preservation of healthy drought-tolerant trees. This was a requirement that I did a strikeout on, is discourage unnecessary water features such as decorative ponds and pools. And I can't tell you the number of pool permits that we review annually. And if we were to say, we really discourage you from having a pool, that's another one of those things that the homeowner will just laugh at you and then slide their permit across the table and say, please process my permit for a swimming pool. So that one, I don't know that we can really do. The decorative ponds, with the number of natural springs that pop up, we have a lot of self-running and self-managed decorative ponds around the city that likely don't have a major impact on either culinary resources or secondary resources, but I could be just kind of making that up or minimizing the issue. Support landscaping techniques that reduce yard waste and improve soil health. This reduce yard waste means bushes that you don't have to trim, grass that you don't have to trim as often, other things where we're creating green waste. And encourage the use of efficient irrigation systems such as drip irrigation with smart controllers and rain sensors. And given the limitations and the metering on secondary water, I think a lot of people have moved that direction, and most of the new homes that come out are relatively efficient. And then the kind of final sections of this plan are public water system consultation. So we've got drinking water source and storage capacity according to Utah State Code. And right now, talking to our city engineer and John, we were talking about it, is the city is consistent with the water storage capacity requirements. And I can show you that in our, it's this one, I'm sorry. So in the impact fee study that's started in 22 and set to be adopted, as far as storage goes, in 2024, we were really close to the required amount of storage, and this is for fire and culinary for all residents, until we built the new tank on 2100, the Randall water tank, additional 2 million gallons, and that bought us time. So right now, that's estimated to have bought us enough time out to 2040, where we'll need to make another major investment in water tank storage that will then get us out to 2054. So we're sitting in a really good space right now, but there was a very interesting and kind of tentative time in development between late 22 and end of 23 before that water tank was up, where we didn't have a moratorium on building, but had Village of Providence Point, Cooperstown, and another Lindy Village all started construction at the same time. It would have been too many residential units that we couldn't have provided fire storage for all in one at one time. And we likely would have at that point said your building permits are going to be metered out slowly until we have this new tank online.
Is the quality of that water that goes in there potable?
It is into the tank. Yeah. So the tank,
Other
it's,
culinary.
yep, it's our culinary and it's,
Culinary then.
It's a
and it's,
culinary.
it's chlorinated and cleaned and yep.
Yeah.
Yep. But that moved from an old gallon tank to a 2 million. Go ahead,
I
Joe.
was gonna say, if you look at the water quality report you got in your utility bill this month, North Ogden has some of the cleanest water in the state.
Oh, yeah.
We don't hardly have to treat it and filter it. It's pretty much,
That's why it tastes so great.
Yeah.
First thing that my dad does, and he lived here for a long time. First thing my dad does when he walks in my house, he goes over and gets a glass of water and he's like, this tastes so much better than that. Like first thing, every time he comes,
Yeah.
because our water does taste good,
Mhm.
you know, relative to other places.
Right.
Scott,
Yeah.
does the plan have any discussions in it regarding like use of gray water for
Mm-mm.
landscaping or
No, we could put that in here. So I think that we're pretty solid on drinking water source and storage capacity and water distribution needs. We have pump stations around the city. We move water, which is kind of interesting. There's areas where we need to, if a tank isn't filling fast enough, we'll pump water up the hill and let it come back down. So we move water around the city regularly, but it comes down to these other, like the DNR coordination suggestions, and then our secondary water system. So here you had mentioned reuse of gray water, right?
Yeah.
Or it'd be like gray water collection for landscaping.
Personally, I don't care if we ended up getting funding to where we could put 30 of those tanks up on the hillside.
Mhm.
Create stability for what's coming out of those rocks for us.
It would, yep. And then section B, secondary water system consultation. So we need to set up a meeting with Division of Water Resources, Pine View Water Systems, and Mountain View Irrigation to just basically talk to them about what are you planning to do and what are your next steps for the city and your other areas. And then Division of Water Resources, we will consult with them as well. But again, it's really a consultation, not an obligation, which is this plan will be really interesting because it's duplicative and also doesn't really have a whole lot of teeth right now. But we're required to do it, which is kind of how a lot of the state code general plan sections are in some ways. And I promised John I wouldn't say too many snarky things, so they'll just stop with that.
because I love the state code.
Yes, yes. And then some optional recommendations. So we may consider the following, creating water budgets based on land use type and lot size. Again, this is more, to me, more related on secondary water. Some of our largest homes on the hill have fewer overall bathrooms, kitchens, washing dishwashers and washing machines than our other homes. Like there are smaller homes that have an internal accessory dwelling unit that likely are 6 to 9 total fixture count. And I approved a building permit up in the Cove that was I don't know, like 10,000 square foot home, but the subterranean level of it was just a 5,000 square foot garage and it had one bedroom and like one bath and then a half bath in it. And so the house was basically like a place to store cars and to bring people to and entertain. And that's it. So that water is, or that house is using very little water compared to some of our other homes that are smaller and have, two families in them or doubled up density, doubled up families in them. So I think the water budgets are not related as much to land use type and lot size unless it's secondary. Revising zoning codes to allow for cluster development. We've been interested in this. We've done some small lot subdivisions through development agreement, but I think this is something worth looking at. Incentives for retrofitting older developments with efficient irrigation and water fixtures. So the Pineview Water Rip Your Strip program does require North Ogden to take over water enforcement. If we can somehow opt our residents into that program without being the water police, I think we'd be interested in that. But I don't know that we want to take over code enforcement for secondary water usage. It seems really daunting to me. Then carefully consider economic development projects that consume excessive water without adequate conservation planning. So no more car washes. We're all done with car washes in the city. But this is a fairly low risk in North Ogden. We don't have land sized large enough to do a major economic development and, incentive property. And most of our other retail drive-throughs, even a restaurant, they're not major users of water.
I do have a comment about the water police thing.
Yeah.
I agree with you. But I also think that before someone comes in and is punitive, especially with all the water assets that we have, we'll want to have some infrastructure that we are the ones that say what's going on versus someone in and kind of telling us what to do with the water assets that we have.
Yeah.
If that's possible. It may not end up being possible, but I think it's something for like future planning consideration.
The nice benefit we have is that the municipal water lobby is probably the strongest in the state in the sense that even a lot of those that provide secondary water provide culinary too. And so what you'll see is the state will step in and start to regulate more heavily, which is funny because water's the most heavily regulated asset, right? But I think you'll see, let's say North Ogden has 500 acre feet more than we need at build out. The state might just say, hey, thank you. We'll put it here. We're going to take it and move it.
Let's figure out what to do with it before that happens.
Well, the trouble is we become more efficient and so we don't need it. And so
what if we were to supplement or join with Mountain View and expand their system with some of our excess water,
yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I think that while this window's not closing, we need to look at that. It is an asset that we have. And I think that people here, like we're doing great stuff for showing up on the news, things like that. But I would say our community, when things shut off, people's lawns are white. And as I drove around the state, that it wasn't the same. It was more white here than it was other places. People are committed to doing the right thing. But we also, need to look at what assets we have in the community that we have. And we do have an asset here. And I think rather than it being taken away from us, because of that geography, there's plenty of assets that we just don't have. But I think that, if we can get out ahead of this planning wise, and we can, get on the right side of some of this water loss stuff and do things like that, or put a bunch of tanks up there, whatever, get as much grant money as we can to study and understand what we have and put ourselves in a good position. I think it could be helpful.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's an unselfish way of looking at things. I think it's a way of looking at the assets that we have, just like any city would look at the assets that we have. But I don't think people have really looked at water as an asset. And it's here, there is water coming out of the ground all over the place.
Yeah.
But we don't understand it very well.
Right. We do have this, but adopt concurrency standards to ensure new developments only proceed when water supply and infrastructure can support them. We basically do this through the will serve letter process and through our own development review processes, having Jason Rennie, the culinary water superintendent, at those meetings that says yes or no, we can or cannot provide culinary water. And then we may look at some required low water landscaping standards. So this says shall, and that means that we would do it. So we may change this to May. Adopt low water landscaping standards for new commercial, industrial, and institutional developments, common interest communities. Those are like HOA. There's a state code, how that's defined. Multifamily housing projects, which I think is the easiest place to put those water-wise landscaping standards in place. And then single family housing, which has been a bit of it's been more difficult in some communities. They've gotten more pushback from residents. Standards would require drought-resistant plant species, limitations on turf grass, mandatory use of efficient irrigation systems, and incorporate mulch and a permeable surface. We have a definition of protective ground cover, which is we use kind of as our code enforcement, but it's rocks, mulch, bark, plants. So we already have a definition of what that means. And then implementation and monitoring. So the Planning Commission may recommend conducting an annual review of municipal water use and ordinance compliance and aligning the capital investment improvement plan with water conservation goals, ensuring infrastructure investments support sustainable growth. And I put these in red as conversation items about how close does the Planning Commission want to be to staff's requirements of managing this stuff? Because we could do an annual review at the beginning of the year or bring Pine View, Mountain View, and our Public Works Department together to talk to us about this. But again, I feel like this is a little bit redundant. You know, we're adding work to somebody's plate that they're already thinking about these things on a regular basis as part of their daily jobs, but maybe that doesn't hurt. And our, capital improvement plan looks at water resources, and it's different than our streets and sidewalk plan, but they look at water resources, what we need and what our next steps are. And we try to time those with major roadway investments because that's the least expensive time to open up the road because you've already, carved off all the asphalt. So 2100 and Fruitland Drive has an old pump station that needs retrofitting and or updating, but that's not going to happen until we do something with the intersection of Fruitland and 2100. And at that time, we'll invest in the culinary water pump station improvements. So those are already, I would say the city's already thinking about that as far as their capital improvement plan goes and looks at like the 5-year plan. But I don't think it's a bad idea. So that's really that's it. That's the section, the water use element as we've drafted it, that has kind of our recommendations from staff for Planning Commission to consider. It does not have any of the secondary water resource stuff in there yet, but just wondered if there's anything else from Planning Commission that you're concerned about, that you think we should consider, look at, that's in addition to what we've shown you today, and then ask any questions. If you have any questions, we're happy to answer them.
I don't know where something like this would come in, but when you mentioned like single family homes being a difficult like adaptation point, that makes sense. I think, as a homeowner looking in, like, for example, our cul-de-sac, we're all very proud of our pretty green grass out front that we never walk on or touch or use, but it sure does look nice. So I think something that could be helpful, and this doesn't necessarily get folded into this, but I think we need an example cul-de-sac or neighborhood where, I don't know if it's just neighborhood initiative or there's some kind of cool innovative grant program but essentially homeowners need to see this in action. Like we need to be able to say, if you go to this cul-de-sac here in North Ogden, they've used, drought resistant landscaping, et cetera, but it's gorgeous, beautiful. I think it's really hard to envision. I mean, sure, there's internet pictures, but to see it in your own community, I think is just a helpful education piece. Or perhaps there's yards that could be highlighted on like the city's water page as exemplars of what we're referring to. Because I know that like that's the big thing, is we want it to look very pretty and beautiful, but how do we achieve that? And that could be just a point of consideration.
I think that's an amazing thought, and a couple of assets that we have that could be really interesting, like bark, mulch, chewed up is a great weed suppressant, and it's a really easy thing. You put rocks on it, you start to get weeds with it. It's really hard to move around.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, at the green waste in the spring, we burn it all up.
Mm-hmm.
What if?
I mean, I would say one of my frustrations from my job working in different municipalities is they're approaching some of these things and it's just making development really difficult. They're requiring basically full civil engineering packages and landscape plans. I think for me, just coming from my experience, when a homeowner or even a business owner, when it comes time to landscape, you can require a landscape plan. But for me and for a lot of people, their landscaper shows up, goes to the nursery, goes to the sod farm and puts down what they've been doing. I think the number one thing you could do would be to hire just really low fee, get a landscape architect to put together and compile a list of ground cover, grass cover, drought resistant turfs, plant list. I mean, you got to figure out a plant list is such an obscure thing that should just be common knowledge.
Mhm.
You know, there should just be 50 or 60 plants that you have to choose from with multiple angles, multiple angles and young and mature images. I think most people are ending up with grass as their primary yard coverage because we don't know any different.
That's right.
I mean, I'm in the industry and I still don't know any different because these are such an
And we
obscure
have a
piece.
landscape architect program at Utah State that has knowledge about what works
And-
exactly in our
and they
area.
compile it, there's interesting enough, the Division of Natural Resources manages urban forests. Salt Lake City is a designated urban forest.
Yeah.
And they put out online, what trees they recommend to plant. But I think if we're talking like, how do we get people to change their mind in North Ogden? Most of this is just a lack of knowledge.
Totally. They don't know how to take care
I
of
don't
it
have
either.
grass. What's the alternative?
I learned how to mow a lawn. I know how to make it look good. Those other things scare me. They're actually not that scary.
But if you replace grass and you had options for different plants or even like a clover lawn, things like that, and you switched people just to a drip system for a good majority of their yard, you've accomplished every goal here.
yeah.
And I want to tear out my park strip, but guess what? Even me in my industry, I don't know what to put there.
Yeah.
To me, it's a big frustration. So I think you could really put North Ogden ahead of the game and get, for a little bit of work on the front end, you'd have to do a lot less on the back end. We recommend going lighter on your landscape. Here's a web page that we've compiled so that when you go down to Ben Lomond Nursery or J&J Nursery or whatever, look for these plants, look for these trees.
I bet some graduate student at Utah State would love, we could have a continual grad student here doing projects along those lines.
There's grass and then I don't know what it's called. I want to go replace it. I don't know what it's called.
There's plenty of grass.
I don't know if I go and buy a grass, if it's even drought tolerant, whatever. So
I got a low grass seed from what's his name? The guy that his thing burned down out by the freeway. The nursery out there. Anyway, and I can't get rid of it. I don't water it. I try to kill it. It's a low level thing. It's so freaking tolerant. I don't want it anymore. It's getting into other things. It's just, he's like, if you want to not water something, this is the seed. I put it down and I can't get rid of it now.
But I use my grass, my kids, we're outside all the time. It's a used turf. I'd still pull it up. For what though? What do I want to put down?
Yep.
How can I still go out and enjoy it? How can I kick a soccer ball? How can I do those things?
There's so many options.
Grass gets vilified, but no one really presents a viable alternative.
Yeah. Well, that's kind of where I was going with the bark is if we had a way of not burning that up, we had a way of grinding it up, people would put that down for weed suppression and different types of things in their yard. And it's really easy to just throw it over the top and it's easy to deal with.
It's only money.
Well, if they pay for it,
I think that to get the,
Just take people's pride in their yard and figure out how to provide them the resources. And
Yeah.
I think
I would just dump stuff.
everyone ends up with dead lawn and they're going, looks like I'm reseeding this year, when you could totally save yourselves the time and most importantly, the energy
Mhm.
to not do that. I'm trying to get my grass to grow on the park strip. For what? Cause I don't know what else to put there.
Well, I mean, that's why I think we need to look at water resources, those different things like that. And how could some of these things be a revenue source for the city? You know, how can we look at the economics and have it be like, hey, we're being aggressive with all this stuff, but how can we do this in a way where it's creative and it's actually not a cost, there's an asset here. You know, and we have assets like that. We just got to figure out how to edit. It can't happen overnight. That stuff takes time and there's complexity to it and whatnot. And, you know,
I mean, I'm all for the light approach, the less city involvement, and I feel like you could sleep pretty well by providing people just the resources.
Yeah.
Businesses and the things surrounding it, I think they usually spring up.
For sure. And just in reference to the like plan we're kind of looking at is that first just intro, you use the word element, I think. I was just curious, does that come from the code? It just struck me as a weird way to.
Yeah, it's called the water use and preservation element of the general plan.
Oh,
like
I
the
see, because
moderate income housing
Gotcha.
plan element of the general plan.
Okay.
So we can eliminate, it could just be the North Ogden City water use and preservation plan.
Yeah. It's not weird if it's part of a larger piece, but otherwise I was like, wait, that's interesting.
Yeah.
And then another just quick question. I believe there's a line that addresses this, but I was just curious in terms of planning commission and when we're looking at what we potentially can, change in terms of our land use or our development here. There was a line in there talking about water reduction in terms of like toilets and like faucets for like maybe commercial and larger apartments, correct?
Mhm.
And does our current code have requirements that address that, or is that would be a change?
That would be a change. That would be, I mean, that's us going in and being like the building department police of what fixtures you're putting in. So any more, state code requires efficient furnaces and efficient water heaters. And there's been some cost to that for home builders as they've had to step into those more efficient uses. But we're not, as the building department or the planning department, telling you what fixtures you need to use or what the rating is of the dishwasher you need to put in or reduce the number of sinks that you have total in your city or in your home. We haven't gotten to that granular level yet. So it's the require low water landscaping standards for multifamily projects and single family. I'd have to go back up and see exactly where it was that is related to just like the fixtures that they have in there. But
Okay.
that's a more difficult one for us to do because it's just really difficult to administer.
Yeah, I wonder on the civic and kind of commercial, it's kind of fascinating when you still have buildings being built with faucets that can stay on continuously that do not have like the sensor technology integration. I know even at my own school, that's an issue. We'll walk into a bathroom and the faucet's been running for who knows how long down the drain. So that's something that this is actually making me think I need to bring back a few changes on those faucets. But
Yeah.
just that's a thought when we have these larger, commercial or civic buildings being constructed, we don't need those sorts of things happening.
I haven't even paid attention when I've used the restroom here in this building, which is the most current, modern building that the city has constructed. Do we have sensor? Yeah, we don't. I mean, even on our own bathrooms, we don't.
Those though.
Yeah, but it's amazing how often people leave them on and it
Yeah.
can be hours before you could go home over a long weekend and they've been running the entire time. So.
No, I do have a little bit of a testimony about the city's water metering system. I sprung a leak on my property, had no idea because it was, out where the meter is. And someone picked up the phone and called me and said, you've got a leak. And it was on the main like 1.5 or 1 inch line out there. It was like an $800 bill. And they said, meet us halfway.
It's great.
Yeah, that's
So
amazing.
it does work. I know
Oh,
it
yeah.
works. I've been on the receiving end of that.
That's cool.
But now it sounds like they can tell every day what's going on rather than every month.
Which is really amazing.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Right. Well, thank you
Well,
for.
if staff doesn't have anything else, so appreciate your time.
It's great training, a great topic.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Very applicable for our city and you guys are doing a great job with it. I mean, John, to get those meters in that's incredible.
No, that was all Dave and his group.
Oh, great.
You know, I work with the secondary water companies around often enough, and I kind of ask them about the secondary watering metering and what my bill's gonna look like, and they say, believe it or not, when we meter residents
They use less.
and they have the information, we see an immediate 28% reduction in water use. And they said, and for the time being, 28% of our water shares back in our pocket gets us a long way.
Yes.
Cause I'm kind of miffed about the whole thing. Like I paid my fee, I paid my yearly fee, and now they want to meter me and nickel and dime me. But that was from the horse's mouth from people that work there. Like, we don't really have, they said we have the money to install the meters because of the grant. We don't have the money to go any further than this. It's really just, here's your water usage for June. And you go, oh man, July is coming.
Yeah.
August is around the corner. How do I deal with it?
Yeah.
So I just thought that was kind of interesting and just me
Yeah.
looking into it.
Yeah.
But the last thing I'll say too is I like the idea of less city involvement, but again, just in some of my experience, the water shares that are not owned by municipalities, they're owned by private secondary water providers. It's just money. They just want more money.
Yep.
They want to make it harder for you to use it so that they can go sell it to somebody else.
Yep. Scarcity.
So I'm a little weary of all of this in the end, that it's actually less water use, that it's more like, oh, sweet. I don't have to go find more water. I just got more water and I'm going to go sell it again.
Yeah. Well, I would argue that North Ogden City is in a very enviable position with all this. You know, I think we can look at it in a different way as well. Like, again, we don't have the assets, but I would argue that we have real water resources. It'd be nice to know what those really look like. And we have great tasting water. Like it's the really good quality. There's a lot of it. Like, you know, it's coming out of the ground all over the place. In fact, it's a building issue in a lot of places because it's so hard to deal with. We have a lot of water there.
To make it taste good.
Yeah. And we live in the middle of a desert. There's a bit of an oasis here. And it's an asset that we really ought to consider as the decades roll on here, because this isn't going to be a fast moving thing.
Right. I think that's a wonderful kind of summary statement. And I agree with you. I mean, the water's such an amazing asset North Ogden has, so thank you. With that being said, are you guys okay if we move on to public comments, item number 6, and see if we have any? I don't believe so. Okay, awesome. So then we will move on to item number 7, remarks from planning commissioners. I do have a remark. I just wanted to say that Weber County Emergency Management, along with some of our local North Ogden like CERT teams, are doing amazing work tonight during this meeting, going through neighborhoods, speaking of emergency preparedness, earthquakes, etc. And it was just really awesome to see the city, citizens step up and take care of their neighbors and plan for emergencies. So that was really awesome to see. Any other remarks from commissioners? Okay. And then we would move into item number 8, which is a report from our Community and Economic Development Director. Nothing. Okay. So we move on to Mr. Call.
If you weren't aware, this is a candidacy declaration week.
Yeah.
So tomorrow and Thursday and Friday are the two days that are left. The recorder will be here till 5 o'clock on Friday. So if you know of anyone interested,
Do those get announced like immediately on Facebook? I noticed that there was one.
it should be every day at 5 o'clock. Currently and then also on the webpage. And currently we have one person for mayor, which is Phil Swanson. And then one for council, which is Zach.
something, yeah.
I forgot his last name.
How many council positions are open?
2 council and 1 mayor, so really 3 positions. And so just we just always make sure people know, so if they're interested, they can sign up.
Thank you.
How's demand looking? How many people have thrown their names in the hat?
That's it.
That's what he said.
So it usually Friday is the busiest day,
Yeah.
so it wouldn't surprise me to fill up and have 6 candidates, across all the positions or more. I think the most we ever had, we had 9 for council for 3 positions at one point in my tenure with the city. So that's kind of about the range of 6 to 9 is about the number of people that'll sign up.
Any rumors about who's gonna sign up?
But
Want some webs going for it.
yeah.
Let's make that definitive. I will never run for a position in North Ogden City ever.
There are less rumors this year than in years past.
Oh.
I'll say that. So, but you never can give much weight to rumors because
And who are the 2 vacancies coming from?
so Mayor Brewy's not running,
Yes.
and then Blake Severing and JD Dalpas
Yeah. It's too
are
bad.
the 2 council members.
JD's up already, huh?
Yeah, he's finished 2 terms with the city.
Yeah.
I hate to see him leave. He's really great with community liaison and talking to residents.
Just really got raked over the coals on that one thing. That's hard.
Okay.
It is a thankless job.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, thank you all for your time and effort in coming in and helping the city.
Thank you.
Well, we would
Thank
entertain
you.
a motion for adjournment if anyone wants to go that
I'll
direction.
motion to adjourn.